And welcome back to the Radical Vision for Disabilities show. I'm so glad you're here. We've got such a great show for you today, and we have more coming next week. I'm just so looking forward to it. This is a show where we talk about radical vision for disabilities, where we understand that people with disabilities need to have a voice, and they don't always have that voice. So how can we give them that voice? How can we help their caregivers to understand what they need or what they want when they're unable to talk, are unable to verbalize that? That's why it's so important for us all to have that understanding. I can't tell you how happy I am that you're here with us today, but I'm also happy that our special guest is on. And without a doubt, he knows a lot about dealing with, that sounds terrible. He knows a lot about having a family with special needs. So without any further ado, here's my friend, John Hanson. Hey, John.
Good morning, Brian.
How are you?
Your smiling face. We actually have sunshine outside here in Ohio. How about that?
How did that happen?
Must know somebody.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, John, tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, we're a blended family. We have 7 children, 3 of whom are adopted. And of those 3 children who are adopted, 2 have special needs. And if you told us all that would be included in the learning curve and the journey that started with my wife's desire to do that for a long time and me saying, all right, we're on board, to where we are now, I don't think I would encourage anyone to just strap themselves into that roller coaster and go for that ride. On the other hand, there's some incredible life lessons we've learned that have been tremendously valuable, life-changing, that I wouldn't trade. So quite the ride, but looking forward to sharing some of the insights, some of the things that we learned for people that may not have a blended family, for people that are curious about this world, for people that work in it. It's their job, it's their profession. So looking forward to share all those insights with your listeners today.
Awesome. If you want to hear more, stay right there. John, thank you so much for coming back on the show. This is awesome.
Well, twice in the same week. I mean, does it get much better than that? Wow.
What a deal. So there's a lot that you have to share, and I really want to hear more about your story. So how did you come about I saw that your wife was a big proponent of you being able to adopt special needs children, but did you have because you have 2 that are with special needs, but you have one that you adopted without special needs. So where did that come from?
Yeah, it was the heart for adoption that my wife had for many years. I think she even had it before we were married. I think she had it as a young lady, as a teenager. So that had always been in her. That hadn't been in my mind or on my radar until she shared it with me after we were married. And it took me a little while, being the provider, the sole breadwinner most often in our married life, thinking of the dollars and cents. And because we did have biological children of our own, I didn't feel like there was this missing spot in our lives where I know some people, they look to adoption specifically because for one reason or another, they weren't able to or aren't able to have children. So it took a little bit longer for me to come along and sign on to that adventure. But then the first adoption was within the States, a readoption. But then the other 2, my wife started doing more and more research on just the conditions at that time in the late 2010, 2011 range of starting to see how children in other countries overseas what they were experiencing. And her heart was really burdened for that and thought, like that starfish story, we can't save them all, but what if we could save 1 or 2?
Yeah.
And I was up for that. I didn't know what all that would entail. No matter how much the education that they tried the best to help families understand, I had no clue. But I wouldn't trade the learning experiences that we had from it, because a lot of them were life changing.
Yeah. So tell us about those lessons. And so before we go into further, I want to encourage our listeners to put in a hashtag live if they're listening live. Tell us where you're coming in from, and then also if you're listening on replay, put in a hashtag replay. So, and then, as always, share this video out with as many people as you can think of. This is really what it's all about, is to grow this community that we have, and it's just going so well. And I'm just so thankful that all of you are here. So, John, I'm sorry, you were saying about the children you have, but I also wanted to ask further about how you came about all this, and you've done such a great job to be able to adopt 3 children, and one that doesn't have special needs, but the other 2 that do. How do you do that? How do you go about doing that? This is not a familiar territory to me.
Yeah, well, 3 things. I hold up 2 fingers. 3 things I actually thought of instead of 2 that are really important. Number 1, my wife's a research hound. That's one thing I greatly appreciate about her. It's not the only thing, but it's one thing in particular where she really infused a love for thorough research. I like to read and study. I've been that way my entire life. But research is a different level. Research is going through every possible channel, filtering through all the noise and all the information, and really getting to, as best you understand, what's the closest to the truth, to the actual experiences for whatever topic you're researching. And adoption was one of those things, and overseas what people were experiencing was another, children were experiencing over there. So I think the research piece was a huge part of it. She didn't come into this blind. She came into it doing a lot of research, and I benefited tremendously from that because I didn't do any. Number 2, on top of research, was our community. You mentioned this earlier, just before we started talking here, about community, how the community is growing for this broadcast. And the community is what makes all the difference in the world. There was no way we could have done it solo. Between the support services that are there after the fact, the education piece before, feedback from families that have already done it, there's a wealth of information. And as time goes on, as technology helps us connect with people, sometimes all around the world, it enables us that much more to have access to that community that enables it to be a joint effort. It just can't be done solo, I don't believe. I'd say the third thing was about those life lessons that you alluded to. Those are things, if you go into it understanding that it's a learning curve, you're not going to have or know everything, and we're still learning today. And that was back in 2013, and well before then, that actually formalized beginning the process in 13. Before that, my wife had been researching it for years. So it's a long process, and I don't know that it ever really does end.
So great. Thank you for that. So tell me a little bit, and our audience, what goes into the life of a father or even a child, the father of someone with cerebral palsy or any other special needs. So how does that look for you?
Yeah, it's very different. And while we would acknowledge the fact that all children are unique, there's a different level of uniqueness simply in the fact that we have biological children that have no special needs at all, and then we have 2 adopted children who do. Now, I think it would be even more difficult if you have biological children that have special needs and don't. And then if you add certain levels of severity on top of that, I think that makes it even more complicated for a parent. So I have the advantage, and I consider it to be that, where these children were intentionally chosen knowing what they had. Or I think it's even greater for a family to have biological children. That's not something you plan for. you have, and particularly if you have both, say your first child or 2, no issues, no special needs, normally adapting, and then you have a child that is not. I think that's an even greater learning curve and requires even that much more support, because this is a lifelong commitment, just like our adoption is, but it started from day 0, day 1. This was a curveball out of left field of gigantic proportions. And now you have under your roof someone who is adapting normally, developing normally, and someone who's not. That requires more time, care, attention because of that. And here's the difficulty that parents are experiencing. One requires more time because of their needs, but the other children are developing and have needs that need to be attended as well.
Right.
How do you take care of the one without neglecting the other or others? And I think that's probably one of the greater day-to-day challenges of how do you make sure enough time is invested across, because you can't make it the same time. If you don't have enough time in a day.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that needs are being met adequately across the spectrum if you have children with both levels? That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old are your children?
Okay. So our oldest is over 17 years old, driving, doing a great job. So proud of him. And then our youngest is 3.
Okay.
And then we have children sprinkled in between. So of the adopted, they're in the preteen age at 12. A couple of they're both 12 with special needs, almost 13. And then the adoption we did that was a readoption within the States. She's 16 and she's working as well, doing a great job with her job. So the age ranges vary there. There's a gap. The youngest is 3, and then the next youngest is almost 11. He's counting down the days literally until he turns 11, reminding us frequently that he's going to be 11, along with the party and the presents that accompany that change in age. But my wife is the glue. I will tell you this ahead of time. There's no secret to this. People think, how do you do it, John? Well, I to be honest, I really don't do the bulk of it. My wife does. She's the glue. So I tell her as often as I can think of it. I said, if you're leaving, I'm going with you, because I can't run the show. She does a phenomenal job of that. And any full-time mom, part-time mom that works and does things at home, hats off to them, because they are the glue of the household, that somehow they keep it all running so well that I don't leave that up to me, because I would not do near as good of a job. And I think somewhere along the line, every single child will be missing something that they desperately need, but I just can't put my finger on what that should be. She does a great job of all that.
Well, that's awesome. That's good to hear. So we got a friend on here, Ted Legal, coming in from Woodstock, Illinois. Hello, Ted. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Let's see, what else does he have to say here? So, Ted, long text. That is how my family is lined up. My mom and the older brother, and now no health problems. And then him with spina bifida. Then my younger sister and brother with no health problems. Huh.
Yeah, bookends. I mean, that's and imagine the person that knows that's has full intellect, but they know that they've got a disability that requires more care. How do they feel, right? Because the ones with developmental disabilities, they're not as fully aware of the time they're taking, maybe not at all. Whereas ones who have a physical disability, they're fully aware. My parents have to give more time to take care of me than to my siblings. How does that work out in the inter-sibling relationship? Because that's a delicate thing. So the parents that can handle this well, where the family unit stays not only intact but strong, that speaks well, I think, to the parenting. It speaks well to the siblings being part of the team. I think you've got to have, now this is my personal opinion I'm sharing with you now, I think you've got to have some spiritual grounding. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. You've got to have some higher purpose, some higher calling, some higher equipping in order to keep filling the fuel tank. Because if it's all dependent on your effort or even your extended community's effort, that tank's going to run dry. You have to have something of a higher purpose or higher calling to tap into, in my experience, in order to not lose faith in, we're going to do the best we can and we're going to make the best out of this so that everybody wins, everybody thrives. Don't know what that looks like, don't know how to accomplish that necessarily, but that's what we're going to shoot for.
Interesting. Wow. So lots of questions. Now, I've got to think. What kind of family did you come from? Did you come from a blended family?
No, all boys. So I had three brothers.
Hmm.
Have three brothers. That's still, thank goodness, all boys. So a very unique perspective in that, where I think at the time four may have seemed like a lot, but we have seven. So and there's families we know that have more than us.
Yeah.
But four was a good number, big enough where you could do some kind of event together, but not so big that you need two vehicles or a bus.
Right.
But only boys. So I didn't have experience of growing up with a sister, with a sibling like that. So there was kind of a double learning curve getting married, of living with a female that's my age. Didn't have that growing up. But
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I appreciate that. So my background wasn't that at all.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. My wife, neither. She grew up. Now she had all sisters. She had two sisters. No adoption in their family either. So this is just something that had been on our heart and mind for quite a few years before we decided to go ahead with it. And we had great support from our community in doing that. Plus, with my employer, they had a fantastic. I worked for Chase at the time, and they had a phenomenal adoption reimbursement that was half the cost. So international adoption, if anybody knows that, it's not inexpensive. Not just the travel, but the actual process itself is tens of thousands of dollars. And so the Chase's support, that in our community, and all the grants and the fundraising efforts done on our behalf, there was no way we could have done it without all of that. That financial piece is ginormous. It's huge.
Interesting. So there's got to be things that have changed forever, and not in a negative way, a positive way as well. So what has changed since you've gone through the adoption process?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'll give you a short list. I don't want to keep people going too long on this, but I would say that the three biggest things I'll share with you is from their perspective, one from our perspective as parents, and one from our biological children's perspective. So I'll give you three perspectives. So the very first one that I would share is from the adopted special needs, or it could be a person with developmental disabilities. It's biological. Doesn't matter. The thing that drives my daughter with cerebral palsy nuts is that no matter where we've gone, and we go everywhere on vacation, Florida, I don't know how many times, love it down there. Everyone stops and asks, not everyone, too many people stop and ask if she needs help. She's not asking for help. She's not looking like she needs help. She's out there on the beach with her walker, having a blast in the water. It bothers her that she's the only kid in our entire family that gets asked if she needs help. She's not floundering. She's enjoying herself. She's even had, my wife has even had to step in and tell people to stop trying to help her because they were ignoring her, saying, I don't need help. Well, they mean well, but she wants to be treated just like everybody else.
Sure.
So unless she asks for help, she doesn't need help. People with or without intellectual disabilities want to be treated as everybody else. If they didn't ask you to get the door, then unless you, as simple as that might seem, right? It seems like, oh gosh, they have a hard time walking as it is. Let me get the door for them. Did you get the door for the people behind them and in front of them that can walk just fine? No, you're already singling them out and treating them differently. Now, if you held the door for that lady or for that gentleman, then that's already who you are and what you do. You're treating them just like you do everybody else.
Right.
But if somebody singles them out and holds the door for them and doesn't do it for anybody else, you're treating them differently. So that's one thing that I would say from their viewpoint. I learned that. Second thing is from our biological children's viewpoint. And here's one thing I really wanted to share. If anybody gets this, the biological children in a mixed family, whether they're adopted or biologically born with a disability or with an intellectual disability, you need to spend even more time engaging those children and asking them questions about what is going on in their life, and giving them eye contact and talking to them and smiling to them, because here's what you don't understand, and I didn't either. The amount of effort and time it takes to take care of an adopted, developmentally disabled child takes away from what that biological child would have received.
Right.
And too often, people interact with the adopted, developmentally disabled child and not the biologically normally developing children. They get ignored. And that happened for years. I can't tell you the hurt that I can see, and eventually they get used to it, of being ignored simply because they're normally developing.
Hmm.
Make sure you take time. If you're going to interact with a family, don't just interact with the one in the wheelchair. Don't just interact with the one with the walker. Make sure you interact with every single child in that family. That's the number one thing I want to make sure it's clear that people take away. And then for us as parents, oh my gosh, we learned a bad day for one kid looks entirely different than a bad day for another kid.
Hmm.
And even in normally developing children, it helped me understand that every single one of our children are unique. Every one of us as a person is highly unique. We might have some temperaments or some skills or abilities that are similar. Those categories exist, but there never will be, there never has been, and there never will be another Brian Wagner exactly like you. And you're like, well, of course, I'm the winking guy. No, I mean, there's lots of people with the same name as you, but there will never be someone with the exact same life circumstances. There's a lot of people with the name John Hanson, I found out with a Google search. But there's never going to be, there never has been, and there never will be another John Hanson exactly like me. So the individuality that is part of who we are, make sure that me as a parent, that I'm parenting them in the way that's best for them. And that applies whether you have 1 or 200 children. The individuality of figuring out what works best for them is how I function best as a parent. Because I want to be discipling, investing, mentoring, coaching, so the relationship is ongoing. It changes as they get older, but I want the relationship there so that long after they're on and experiencing and enjoying their own life as an adult and maybe as a parent, the relationship is still strong as ever. It just looks a little different.
Yeah. So how has it changed? I mean, how has it changed? How do you see your son? And obviously he helps a lot with the chores around the house and does a lot to make his mom's life easier. But how can you see the change in him from a total? I mean, because he's got to be different than regular kids. I mean, regular kids. I hate that word. Normal kids. I hate that
Normally
word.
Developing. Yeah, it's fine. I you're saying, yeah.
Neurotypical. So how do you see a change in him?
Yeah. So, it goes back to what I said, what looks like a good day and what looks like a bad day where we're going to have challenges with things.
Yeah.
And he's a complicated cocktail because not only is there neglect trauma built in, but then it's also compounded by the fact that there's severe intellectual disabilities too. Thank goodness that the physical disabilities aren't also on top of that. But it makes a great challenge then of what a good day looks like for him. It can vary widely. Whereas a good day for the others, I think it's, you think you're a patient person until you're put in a situation where you have to learn how to actually use it on a regular, frequent basis. I experienced this in the military. When I went through basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the summer. I was 32 at the time. So I joined the National Guard. I went down there for training. I was training with 17-year-olds also. So if you understand the mental thinking and the maturity level, the decision-making processes between when I was 17 and 32, there is a world of difference there. I learned patience. I learned how to apply patience the hard way because you don't have to use it in the times where it's not required. You have to use it when it's required. So I learned the hard way of what patience feels like, of having to apply it. It felt like to me far too often. Well, it's the same way, even more so when that's a child in your household. What does patience look like? Oh gosh, it's a tough learning curve. But it also meant that it stretched what patience feels like. So to me, what's a normal situation or nothing at all to someone to them that doesn't have that experience to relate to, their level of patience doesn't kick in as late as mine does. My need for patience, I have a higher threshold for that now because of this. And so does my wife. Where beforehand, what felt like a lot to us doesn't even register on the radar now. So one thing that I would say to you is that uh, that level of patience, going through difficult times, and people that, whether they adopt or they go through a difficult physical time, you could attest to this. You have something to compare it to: life before, life after.
Mhm.
Your experience of what a hard time looks like or what a bad day looks like now is compared to those events that are significant. So it helps me give greater patience to others as well,
Hmm.
because until I know their story, until I'm in their shoes, I don't know what they as a family, what that child that's throwing a fit, I have no idea. You really cannot judge a book by its cover. And I think that might be even the greater takeaway than the patience part is being gracious to people, because until you fully know their story, and that takes relationship and asking questions, uh, people have no clue what's going on in our lives unless they ask, and it's the same for them. So
Yeah.
being very cautious about casting even subconscious judgment on someone.
So along those lines, Ted puts up his comment here, and it sounds like exactly what you're talking about. So he has a total different view of just disregard and whatnot. So his experience was the opposite of what you talked about. So yeah, everybody's different. So
Yes.
is there anything else you'd say to Ted?
Yeah, first of all, I'm strongly empathetic. So since I was a kid, I quickly put myself in somebody else's shoes, even though I don't know their world.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly project what that might feel like, and I can't imagine. My wife regularly watches this show on YouTube. A gentleman that goes around the world and interviews children, and even I think they're all children, small to almost adult age, with developmental disabilities or physical disabilities, and he asks them how they feel, and goes through a whole interview with them. And so, what I feel for Ted in particular is people that have got a fantastically sharp mind, and yet it's a part of their body that's holding them back. That they have that limitation.
Yeah.
We really have got to figure out, and this is where it takes the asking questions and engaging. But I think it goes to an even deeper level than that. That shows that you care, but it goes to an even deeper level of valuing life, of looking at someone. I had the privilege of, before adopting, my mom raised us in volunteering in nursing homes. We did it from when I was a boy all the way up to when I graduated high school and left home. And it's a different side of that development in life where a good number of them may not have even remembered my name, didn't know who I was. They were at that part of their life or had severe physical limitations. You know what? I learned through that I engaged with them just as if I was talking to someone that was fully there, fully cognizant of what I was talking about. It actually trained me as a kid to interact with someone that didn't interact typically. And so giving eye contact, smiling, talking, having a conversation, that's all part of lending value to someone's life. And that speaks deepest to not only the person in the wheelchair or the person in the walker with the walker, but to their caregivers, their family, their siblings as well. So I feel heavy for Ted. I know he's not the only one that has stories like that. And I'm grateful to have had all these experiences in my life where I make sure that I treat people as a living being first, and then find out how to engage, have a conversation. I think Ted would rather have 1,000 people be genuinely kind and interact than two close friends that, because all those people, the number of people that mattered enough to them to interact with him, engage with his mind, engage with who he is as a person, would matter more to him than a handful of close relationships, because I think that had to be very difficult for him to be ignored. Yeah, grief for him.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe that our time has gone so quickly. We're already at the end of our time. Is there anything you would leave? Because we talked about this question in the upfront, and I think you've already answered it. But is there anything else you would leave the audience with?
Yes, absolutely. I use this in my presentation on customer discovery, so I'm giving away a little secret. Don't share this with anybody. But the most important customer, when I figured out what the definition of customer was, it was someone we regularly interact with.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important customer, is not the ones that pay you money. It's not even the ones that work with you, for you. It's not even your inner circle, family, close friends. The most important customer is yourself.
Hmm.
If you are a caregiver of someone that has developmental, physical disabilities, whatever, you must find ways, as demanding as your time schedules are, and I know what they are, you've got to find ways to invest in yourself, into self-care. I know that sounds selfish. I thought it was for a long time because the word self is in it, but self-care is putting gas in the tank. If you're not regularly doing simple things for yourself so that you can get some fuel back in the tank, you're going to be running on fumes, which means that you, the ones you're caring for, your inner circle, your professional colleagues, and the world as a whole is not getting the best from you. You've got to find ways, as small as they could be, as simple as make sure you're getting enough water, a little bit of exercise, reading, something for fun, humor, laughter, simple, low, no cost, little time required, regularly, intentionally making time to give back to yourself. You've got to do that. You have to, so that everybody can get your best.
Awesome. Great. I love it. Thank you, John. And so does Ted. Ted, he commented here that, let's see. Oh, there it is. Yeah, he thanks for your time and he appreciates your parents' perspective. So that's awesome. And
Wow.
Yeah. Nice job, John. Thank you very much. And I'm going to send you back to the green room if you don't mind. And I'm going to close the show out and we're going to talk a little bit about what we have going on in the next week. So that would be the week of March 25th, right? So wow, we're almost 3/4 of the way through the week. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Oh, it's March 22nd.
I know. Yeah, the week of the 22nd sounds like you're getting towards the tail end of March, and we are. Time flies.
Yeah,
doing that. But I'll enjoy the virtual snacks in the green room while you close it down.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
All right. Yep. Take care. Wow. Instant value. I love that guy. He is so kind and so giving with his time. You know, I think about what we all have. We all have blindness. We've already talked about that. But he has a unique ability to be able to deliver that from and deliver his mission, his goals, his life, you know, to tell us that to other people without a condescending way about him. So just so good to have him on. For next week, we have a big lineup. So on Monday, we have Lynn Delgadio coming on. She is someone that has helped a lot to understand, helped us all to understand our vision and where it should be in terms of our core beliefs and our core strengths. John Molitor, as always, that guy is top notch. Just really love that guy. And he brings so much to the audience when it comes to his knowledge about the brain and all that goes into that. And then, Wednesday we'll have me. I'll be on as your host and as your guest. But then Thursday we have Josh Evans. Josh Evans is from the Illinois Association of Rehabilitation Facilities, and he knows a lot about his vision and how his vision is aligned with his core beliefs. So that's awesome. But then on Friday we have Friday is Josh Evans. But Thursday we have Crystal Washington. Wow. Crystal Washington is going to be on here on Thursday. Vision Live show is going to not be the same because she is phenomenal, just phenomenal. And she really talks about technology. So listen for that. And then Abby Curran is going to be on Stroke of Genius. We now call it Radical Vision for Disabilities. So what a great week coming up. And I just appreciate all of you being on. Thank you so much. And as always, keep one eye on the road. Bye.